Right now, we're going to head out to Philadelphia to show you an impressive American Flyer layout. It's impressive for a number of reasons. It's large, it's realistic, and you'll get a charge out of how these trains were converted so that they have more power now than the day they were new.
What you see here is the culmination of a fantasy, the realization of a dream that was born back in the 1940s, when a young boy named Richard Robinson used to stare with wonder at the giant model train layouts in the big downtown Philadelphia department stores. Maybe one day he would have one. Maybe one day people would stare with wonder at his layout. That day is today.
Well, I've always liked American Flyer because it was much more realistic than the competitive Lionel trains. It was scaled to prototype dimensions, operated very smoothly, and operated on two-rail track, which was certainly much more realistic, and combined the smoke and choo-choo that Gilbert heavily advertised in the era. I started in 1948 when I was given my first train when I was 10 years old for a Christmas present, and I've collected trains ever since. All the money I could save when I was a kid, I went to buy trains, from collecting soda bottles off the beach and save that money to Christmas time and buy trains. And when I got out of the service in 1962, I was able to realize a lot of childhood fantasies because these trains were readily available at very minimal cost, and it was relatively easy to accumulate a very nice collection very quickly.
So now Robinson has an American Flyer layout with over 1,000 feet of S-gauge track. Construction began a quarter of a century ago, and improvements are made continuously. The layout is 12 feet wide and more than 50 feet long. More than 40 switches keep things running smoothly. This layout is somewhat like a smorgasbord of modeling. Included is a loop of more than 125 feet of three-rail Lionel O-gauge track.
Well, it started out as an S-gauge layout, but I realized that I always liked O-scale, and it was impractical to try to combine the two into one layout. You can't really operate two different scales with an integral layout, but by combining the O-scale loop on the outside edge of the trains, in effect they don't interfere, and I don't run them at the same time, but I could enjoy running O-gauge trains as well. I've always liked Flyer S-gauge, but in recent years, particularly the last 15 years, the growth of the product available in O-scale, both two-rail and three-rail, has been phenomenal. It gives me great pleasure to be able to buy and operate and run these wonderful O-scale models that are available today.
The trains are American Flyer. The track is not. It's bendable Gargraves track, which allows the modeler a great deal of flexibility.
Started with Gargraves, stayed with it. It was, at that time in the 1970s when I started this layout, it was really the only track available. It's flexible. It allows you to design any radius as you want. This is stainless Gargraves track, so it's relatively impervious to moisture and has not had any corrosion problems or plating problems as some of the other track can do. It's flexible like other competing brands of flexible track, but it's just a matter of taking it, and you can scribe lines on your layout to the curves that you want. It's just a matter of taking your hands and bending it.
Now, did you notice how smoothly everything is running here? Part of the reason is simply good execution and good design. But part of the reason is because Robinson converted these American Flyers from AC power to filtered DC power. It's not only smoother, it's quieter. And it allows the train to operate with more power while generating less heat. It's actually something American Flyer itself experimented with a long time ago, but the power supplies back then simply couldn't supply the get up and go. In the 1960s, the technology became possible to do what Robinson wanted to do. It allows him to use toy trains on a scale layout. And it's something almost any modeler can do with a little time, a little know-how, and a few bucks worth of materials from the corner electronics store.
Well, to convert any Flyer Gilbert engine to run on DC power is really quite simple. This is a Hudson tender from the 1950 era, and by removing the tender shell and exposing the sequence reverse unit inside, we can leave that in place and just reroute the wires around it or take it out as you like. But if you want to leave it in place for originality's sake, this is a silicon diode rectifier available at Radio Shack for a few dollars. And by placing that directly behind the sequence reversing unit, it's only a matter of unsoldering the power lead wires from these and connecting them up, and you can leave in place the original wires on the sequence reverse unit if you put pigtail wires on this and just solder them on, so that you can leave in place all the original wiring. It's just a matter of jumper leading over to the original ones, and once its power lead is disconnected, it's inactive anyway, so it just serves as a junction block for the wiring. That's all there is to it. You can put it back on. It takes 5 minutes to make the conversion.
With the different types of trains and tracks, the hundreds of cast iron figures, and the realistic scenery, what you also see is potential. The potential of what you can do with classic American flyers and a little creativity.